There was another interesting event this week, which is that Sonia Gandhi has spiked a plan to increase sugar prices in PDS. Now, how do you see this move? Because on one hand, we have the government kind of going ahead with all the reform measures, be it diesel price increases or other non-populist measures, so to say. So where does this fit in the picture?
It may sound strange, but I actually support this move to spike this, because let's look at what's really happened in this country. Growth rate has slowed down. Inflation has really risen. It's a big problem. The period between September and December, or September and January, is called the festive season here, because a lot of religious functions fall in this period. Food is a very big part of religious functions. Sweets are a big part of this function. And people buy sugar, across economic strata, where sugar consumption goes up a little bit. Do you really want to, and for what? If you work out the math, it's 2,000, 3,000 crore, closer to 2,000 than to 3,000 crore. For that, you want to do something like this at a time like this? Sure, I am against all subsidy, but that's at a philosophical level. I'm against all subsidy if you can ensure that your growth goes up to 9%, if you ensure that your inflation goes to below 5%, if you ensure that jobs are being created. But I just think to do this
at this time,
at
maybe
this point
maybe
in
it's a bad
time
time to do it. Yeah.
So it's a question of balance. So I don't know what Sonia Gandhi's motivations might have been for doing this, but I think it's good that it was done.
Maybe they're just postponing it to another time. Maybe by that logic, maybe they're waiting for the festive season.
There are bigger and better things that they need to do other than increase the price at which sugar needs to be sold to the poor.
Especially when the fiscal deficit is kind of glaring.
I don't think you should worry about sugar. They need to be worrying about bigger things.
Okay. Sukumar, we've seen Chief Justice of India, Justice Kapadia's tenure coming to an end. There have been some marquee judgments like 2G, Vodafone, arbitration during his tenure. But there have also been some judgments like media reporting of court proceedings, which have been slightly criticized. How do you look back at his tenure?
I think it's been an extremely good tenure, right? And the interesting thing was he took over at a time when the government seemed very, very unsure of itself. And in India, typically, India is a very, very exception-driven society, right? It's not a rules-driven society. It's trying to progress towards a rules-driven society. And I think many of the judgments that the Supreme Court delivered under Chief Justice Kapadia's tenure reaffirmed that commitment to move towards a rules-driven regime. So in the case of Vodafone, for instance, it didn't allow a retrospective change which would affect a company, which is a very, very sound legal principle, because it's not that other countries don't levy retrospective taxes, but if there are any court cases, and this is what happens in the United Kingdom, if there are any cases, the cases are left out of the ambit of it. They're grandfathered, so to say, which means it does not impact them in any way. So I think it was a good judgment. If you look at the presidential reference again very, very clearly defines the roles that the judiciary need to play and the government needs to play. If you look at the arbitration judgment, again, it shouldn't have happened in the first place, because what really happened was when Indian companies or Indian parties got into agreements with parties or companies outside the country, and they said that if we have a dispute, we'll have an arbitrator outside the country. You started allowing courts within the country to interfere in that arbitration process, stop it, stall it, other things, which the Supreme Court has finally said can't be done anymore. Which I think which is the way it should have been in the first place, but I'm happy that it got done now. And even in the media case, I think the criticism comes from the fact that they haven't given a clear answer, the court hasn't given a clear answer, and the court hasn't stood up strongly for freedom of expression, right? Because I think, especially as journalists, all of us wanted the court to send out a strong, stirring message saying, here's what we stand for. That message didn't go. So they left it as a very, very ambiguous kind of thing, which in many ways doesn't change anything from the past, except that it probably institutionalizes to some extent the relief that someone or a company or an individual who's involved in a case can prevent the press from covering that. It institutionalized that relief that person can get, which again I think is not such a great thing. Because to my mind it does infringe on freedom of expression. So it would have been good if the court had come out with a very, very strong judgment and sent out a message. It didn't. But I don't think you can say that it was a judgment which was extremely negative either. So, and that's probably one of the few cases. But if you look at most other cases that happened in this period, the court stood for the rule of law. The court delivered some very, very sound judgments, and I think that's probably why this tenure of Kapadia will be remembered.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sukumar. That's it in today's edition of Headspace. Stay tuned for more.